On the 8th of July 1944, the British Second Army launched Operation Charnwood, a large-scale offensive in Normandy, France that aimed to secure the key city of Caen. Among the units involved in the operation was the 2nd Battalion, the Lincolnshire Regiment of the 3rd Division, which was tasked with advancing south from the area of Beauregard and capturing the village of Hérouville. Preceded by a significant air and artillery bombardment, the 2nd Lincolnshire commenced its advance at 0430 on the morning of the 8th of July. Spearheading the attack was the battalion's B Company, which set off from its start line as planned, but was immediately subjected to an intense volley of German machine gun and mortar fire, which inflicted the first losses on B Company. On top of this, the company sustained additional casualties due to an enemy minefield, including the company commanding officer, Major Leslie Colvin, who stepped on an anti-personnel mine and sustained a serious wound to one of his legs and shrapnel to his body. In spite of these wounds though, Major Colvin refused to be evacuated, and instead he remained on the front line, leading his company forward to their objective, with the outskirts of Hérouville being reached at approximately 0500. Here, the British infantry became engaged in fierce close-quarter fighting, with historian Gary Waite noting that Hérouville itself consisted of winding narrow lanes with 2-metre-high stone walls bordering various small holdings, and houses with blind alleys running in between. Ancient stone farm buildings, with their various nooks and crannies, had been turned into veritable strongpoints, with well-camouflaged sniper and machine gun nests scattered amongst the orchards and outbuildings, thus making the village far easier to defend than to attack. Trench systems, tunnels, and booby traps added to the confusion. At the centre of the German defence of Hérouville was an observation post located in the tower of the village church, which Major Leslie Colvin realised had to be taken out if the British advance was to be maintained. Accordingly, the Major rallied and personally led a group of his men up to the church perimeter wall, where he instructed them to lay down a base of fire against the enemy position. After a few minutes, a handful of German soldiers emerged from the church and surrendered to the British infantry, with Major Colvin ordering his men to occupy the position and set up their own observation post in the tower. At around the same time, the reserve platoon of B Company was ordered to move up and establish itself in the southern end of the village. Commanded by Sergeant Thomas Rippin, this platoon successfully carried out its task, and by mid-morning on the 8th of July, it was in a defensive position in an orchard on the southeastern edge of Hérouville. However, no sooner had the platoon taken up its position did it suddenly come under heavy fire from all sides, as groups of German infantry appeared, seemingly out of nowhere, and surrounded the platoon. Although outnumbered and cut off from the rest of B Company, Sergeant Rippin quickly organised his platoon into a tight-knit defence, and in the face of German machine gun, artillery and mortar fire, they successfully held off the first wave of enemy attacks. To the Germans, it was considered imperative that Sergeant Rippin's platoon was dealt with as soon as possible, as the British force was deployed adjacent to one of the key roads that linked Hérouville with Caen. As such, for as long as the platoon remained in its position, the Germans were unable to reinforce their Hérouville garrison. It was for this reason that they significantly increased the intensity of their attacks over the next few hours, and by early afternoon, Sergeant Rippin's force had been reduced to just 10 men, having started the day with approximately 30. Nevertheless, those who could still fire a weapon continued to fight and hold their ground, until finally, in the late afternoon of the 8th of July, reinforcements arrived in the form of C Company, which had been ordered to move up and assist B Company in clearing Hérouville. Together with the remnants of Sergeant Rippin's platoon, C Company drove off the last of the German attacks, and eventually consolidated the position. Sergeant Rippin and his men were then withdrawn from the area to rest and reorganise, with the sergeant later being awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal in recognition of his outstanding courage and leadership. His medal citation states that, under continuous machine gun and mortar fire, Sergeant Rippin organised the resistance and beat off several determined enemy counterattacks, although the platoon was completely surrounded and cut off from the battalion. By his personal courage and bravery, this non-commissioned officer inspired those of his platoon that had not become casualties to hold on to their position under the greatest difficulty. The forward position held by this platoon undoubtedly prevented the enemy from working round and infiltrating into the main battalion position, Sergeant Rippin showed complete disregard for his own personal safety and was an inspiration to his men. Following the stand of Sergeant Thomas Rippin and his platoon, the 2nd Battalion, the Lincolnshire Regiment, completed the capture of Hérouville in the evening of the 8th of July 1944, with B Company having been pulled into battalion reserve, whilst A, C and D companies assumed responsibility for the defence of the village. That night, the Germans launched one final counter-attack in an effort to retake Hérouville, with the 2nd Battalion's war diary recording, "At about 2000 hours, the enemy counter-attacked with tanks and infantry. C Company knocked out one tank with a Piat and scored 3 hits on a second, causing it to withdraw. Self-propelled anti-tank gunners claimed 2 tanks hit. Attack then petered out." In total, the 2nd Battalion, the Lincolnshire Regiment, suffered 135 casualties in liberating Hérouville, of which 22 men were killed in action. German losses for the battle are unknown, although the 2nd Battalion's war diary notes that it took around 30 prisoners of war over the course of the day. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe so that you never miss one of my future videos.